WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for tuning into West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. This is Newslink and here are the top stories. The United Nations Human Rights Office deplores recent violence in Senegal and calls for an impartial investigation. Nigeria's National Assembly elects the Senate President and Speaker in a fierce process. Manifesto trend spreads beyond political parties as pressure groups in Sierra Leone embrace programs to hold politicians accountable. And the ECOWAS Court of Justice rules against former Liberian President Taylor over pension and allowances payment. Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is James Adjapong with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin in Mali, where 21 political parties and civil society organizations in the capital city Bamako have launched a movement named Front Against the Referendum. The purpose of this movement is to protest against the draft new constitution, which is scheduled to be submitted to a referendum consultation on Sunday, June 18, 2023. Among the groups involved in the front are the coordination of the organizations of the appeal of February 20th, 2023 to save Mali, Convergence for the Development of Mali, CODEM, and the Alliance for Solidarity in Mali, Convergence of Patriotic Forces, ASMA-CFP, led by former Prime Minister Sumelu Bubei Maiga. Isaka Ujim, the spokesperson for the front, emphasized that their movement aims to raise awareness among Malians about the violation of the current constitution and transitional charter. They argue that the draft new constitution does not provide solutions to the country's problems and therefore does not warrant a referendum. Alassane Abba, the Secretary General of CODEM, voiced his opposition to the project, stating that both the project and the campaign for the new constitution are unnecessary. He pointed out that the current constitution does not grant anyone the authority or right to adopt a new constitution. Nearly 2 weeks after the deadly confrontations in Senegal, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says it deplores the violence that rocked the country and resulted in the loss of lives. The Rights Office is calling on the Senegalese government to ensure that investigations are prompt, independent and thorough, and that anyone found responsible for unjustified or disproportionate use of force is held to account regardless of their status or political affiliation. More details with Marty C.
The document reads, "We are deeply concerned by the developments in the human rights situation in Senegal in recent weeks, where at least 16 people were killed and more than 500 arrested during 3 days of demonstrations between the 1st and 3rd of June. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights calls on the Senegalese government to ensure that investigations are prompt, independent, and thorough, and that anyone found responsible for unjustified or disproportionate use of force is held to account, regardless of their status or political affiliation." The UN Rights Office also expressed concern about, and I quote, "the continuing restrictions on freedom of expression and peaceful assembly following the demonstrations." In response, the Senegalese government, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, spoke of the events that had nothing to do with people's ability to exercise their rights of expression and demonstration. According to the government, the aim of the demonstrations were undoubtedly to spread terror, paralyze the economy, and bring the country to a standstill. Senegalese diplomats have indicated that the state will take all measures to preserve the country's stability, reaffirming the country's commitment to the rule of law and democracy.
Matisi filed that report. President of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, has congratulated the newly elected Senate President and Speaker of the House of Representatives and other principal officers of the 10th National Assembly. The State House, in a statement, said the President, after receiving the legislatures, charged them to, as a matter of urgency, settle down for the main business of governance. WADR's Usman Umar in Abuja reports.
The new Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, and the new Speaker, Tajuddin Abbas, visited the presidential villa shortly after their election into the third and fourth highest offices of the land, respectively. President Tinubu, in a statement, told all the principal officers that being elected as a presiding officer of the National Assembly is a great honor and comes with a huge responsibility. The president expressed confidence that the newly elected leaders will justify the confidence reposed in them by their members and many Nigerians. For his part, Abdullahi Adamu, the national chairman of the ruling All Progressives Congress APC, described Akpabio and Abbas, Senate President and Speaker respectively, as notable politicians.
I have reason to believe that the people that have emerged ultimately are the choice of the legislators as elected by our people. And I believe they will do well. I believe they will represent the yearnings and aspirations of our people. And I believe they will take this as a trust and ensure that whatever they do it in promoting of the national unity and ensuring that government policies do not suffer in the altars of the chambers of the National Assembly.
Also speaking, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and Yahaya Bello of Kogi State say the duo, being the choice of the ruling party, will be responsible and accountable.
We really just need to wish them all the very best, pray for them, and hope that this 10th Assembly can indeed also do better than the 9th Assembly.
My expectations are that from this very moment onward, they should settle down, bring everybody that are aggrieved in one way or the other. Let there be inclusivity.
The lawmakers in both chambers are expected to, in the coming days, constitute various relevant committees to begin legislative activities in earnest. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
If you are just tuning in, this is Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, and we are streaming all around the world on WADR.org. In Sierra Leone, manifestos are not just now a document political parties prepare as their campaign promises when elected into office. Manifesto documents have also become a pattern among pressure groups by targeting politicians and political parties. The Sierra Leone Women's Manifesto 2023 is one of the initiatives from several locally based civil society organizations, among them Campaign for Good Governance. WADR's Patrick Salia in Freetown reports.
The document, he said, reflects the views of the estimated 52% of women across Sierra Leone and is a proactive measure to see their priority policy issues are captured in the political parties' manifestos. Consultations, SAR said, were done at district, regional and national levels.
How do we have the minimum 30% quota? That is to have women in elective and appointive positions, and also issues around health, economic empowerment for women, issues of education, the welfare of women. These are some of the key recommendations that came. After the consultation, the document was launched and presented to the political parties.
Given the challenges women, especially those in the majority who reside in the rural areas, are faced with, the Women's Manifesto is themed Advancing Gender Equality and Inclusion for a Prosperous Sierra Leone, an instrument which is hoped will gradually draw attention to their needs and concerns and to enable them participate actively in public affairs.
Most of the women's recommendations are in the manifesto simply because I've gone through all the pages and I've read their manifestos. So the next step now is post-election assessment. So we've done the pre-election assessment, ensuring that what was presented is in their manifesto. So the post-election assessment now will be the implementation aspect. And this is where the women will be trained. Recently, we've done the training on the advocacy tool, which the women will use for the integration of this recommendations into the country's national development plan, because whoever wins will have to develop a 5-year development plan.
In January this year, President Julius Maada Bio signed into law the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill 2022 to transform women's elective and appointee governance roles, economic empowerment, and protection from mere political rhetoric. The law also gives 30% of all jobs in not only elective positions, but also in all jobs within the civil and private institutions, and extended maternal leave from 12 to 14 weeks, among other things. Patrick Salia, WADR News, Freetown.
In the Gambia, reactions have continued for President Adama Barrow's alleged announcement of a third-term candidacy in the 2026 presidential election. Perceived as unjust and undemocratic, many Gambians in reaction urged Barrow to focus on improving the living standard rather than his quest for power. While the president's speech during the meeting with his supporters is unclear, the nation's 1997 constitution allows him to run in the next election and even beyond. Our Banjul correspondent Sankule Janko has more in this report.
President Barrow, according to many, including political analysts, may have signaled his third-term ambition, thereby contesting in the 2026 presidential election. An excerpt of Barrow's speech during a meeting with his supporters in Nyani Kunting in the Central River region of the Gambia may fall short of correctness in the form of a declaration, but still experts insist he communicated his political agenda. He says, "They are going around telling people that President Adama Barrow is about to step down, but I want to tell them that they will still have to wait a little longer. What I will do to them in 2026 would be even worse than what I have done in 2021. President Barrow had campaigned and promised to lead the affairs of the country for 3 years, after which he would step down, having organized and conducted elections. Fast forward, he extended the 3 years to 5 years and won re-election for a second term. Here in the nation's capital, Banjul, some Gambians have reacted to the news of Barrow's alleged third-term candidacy.
If you look at it, I don't think it's an advantage to him. Because looking at the way things are going, everything is expensive, especially the food commodities.
Currently, economic situation is not good. For me, I don't buy that idea for him to run for a third term.
For Sanjay, a political science lecturer at the University of the Gambia, will or not misinterpreted, Barrow has every right to contest as per the Constitution. But that, in itself, is his biggest failure.
His failure as a president, in the sense that when he was elected in 2016, and he was to deliver a new constitution to the Gambian people, serve for 3 years, deliver a new constitution and organize elections in which he will not contest. But he reneged on that 3-year promise, and he has also failed to deliver a new constitution to us, which shows his biggest failure as president of this country.
The Gambia's 1997 constitution, last amended in 2001, is very much the country's supreme official binding document. In 2020, a draft constitution that had amendments including a term limit for the head of state was presented to the legislature for consideration, but was thrown out following disagreement among MPs. For Newslink on West African Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
In other news, the ECOWAS Court of Justice has delivered its judgment in a suit filed by former Liberian President Charles Taylor. The former president had asked the court to order the Liberian government to pay his pension and other benefit for 20 years following his resignation on 11th August 2003. Charles Taylor is currently serving a 50-year jail term in a UK prison for aiding and abetting war crimes in neighboring Sierra Leone. WADR's Darlington Pogba in Monrovia reports.
In his 10-page application filed before the court through his lawyer who doubles as a veteran Nigerian lawyer, Femi Finani, Charles Taylor requested the court to compel Liberia to pay his pension and other retirement benefits from August 11, 2003 to the present. He also requested a 6% interest per month, and thereafter Liberia should ensure the payment of his pension benefits are current in line with the Constitution of Liberia. However, according to the lead lawyer who represented Liberia, Councillor Lafayette Gu, the court rejected the application on grounds that the former president did not honorably retire. As such, he cannot receive a pension.
We argue that Mr. Taylor did not retire honorably. Mr. Taylor was on an indictment by the International Court. Mr. Taylor's government was under pressure. We know we were here 2003. and he had no option but to resign. And even during his resignation, he was escorted by 3 presidents of the world to Nigeria. And even while in Nigeria, he was still under some protective custody until in 2006 that the government library requested for him to be turned over. So you cannot consider those circumstances to be honorable.
Meanwhile, the chairman emeritus of JAS, former ruling National Patriotic Party Syrian Allen, insists the former president deserves his benefits on grounds that he voluntarily resigned in 2003.
Was there any legal ruling in Liberian court that made former President Taylor dishonorably discharged? No. Did the legislature of Liberia impeach him? No. Did he turn over to his successor? Yes. There was a successor installed as president to complete his term? Yes. So he was not dishonorably discharged. So as former president of the country, he is entitled to his benefits.
Now that the ECOWAS court has ruled on the matter, it means the former Liberian leader will have to seek resources elsewhere to cater for the needs of his siblings back home in Liberia. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pogba in Monrovia.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The United Nations Human Rights Office deplores recent violence in Senegal and calls for an impartial investigation. Nigeria's National Assembly elects the Senate President and Speaker in a fierce process. Manifesto trend spreads beyond political parties as pressure groups in Sierra Leone embrace programs to hold politicians accountable. And the ECOWAS Court of Justice rules against former Liberian President Taylor over pension and allowances payment. Still ahead, we have our newspaper review, guest interview, and some sports updates. Kindly stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
This is West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. And you are listening to Newslink, which is bringing you all the updates as far as news is concerned in the sub-region. Let's get back to Nigeria, where police say rescue operations are still underway after a boat accident on the Niger River in the northern region of the country, which reportedly killed at least 100 people. Ogio Bierika reports.
Early Monday morning, a boat carrying wedding guests from Egboti village in Niger State capsized. According to a resident of the village, none of the passengers were wearing life vests. This, coupled with the accident taking place at 3 a.m., led to the high death toll as officials were not immediately alerted. The local daily Nigerian Tribune reported that the passengers were from Pada, Egu and Gakpan villages in Kwara. Among the deceased women and children returning from an overnight wedding ceremony, the funerals for 60 of those who lost their lives have already been held, while the search for some bodies adrift is still underway. This accident is not without precedent. The area around the confluence of rivers Niger and Benue has been the site of similar incidents. In May 2021, in the said area, according to another local daily media, as many as 160 people died in similar accident.
Ogio Bierika filed that report. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, said the global number of forcibly displaced persons has reached a record high of 110 million people. It says ongoing conflicts in countries such as Ukraine and Sudan have forced millions of people to flee their homes. The UNHCR's report, released on Wednesday, revealed that there was an increase of approximately 19 million people, reaching a total of 108.4 million by the end of last year. Since then, the number has further risen to 110 million, primarily due to the conflict in Sudan, which began 8 weeks ago. The forced displacement report highlights that in the 2 decades preceding the Syrian conflict in 2011, the global figure remained relatively stable at around 40 million refugees and internally displaced people. However, in recent years, the number has consistently risen, more than doubling the previous levels. The report also states that currently, more than 1 in every 74 people worldwide is displaced.
This is the newspaper
Review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Up next, we have our press stories from Banjul with WADR Sankole Janko.
Let's begin today's press review with the Fourier newspaper, whose lead story reads PDOI's statement on the state of the nation. Senegalese soldiers release Gambian teenagers detained in Casamance. George orders Permanent Secretary Sanyang to appear before him. IMF approves immediate disbursement of $6 million to the Gambia. Let's move on to the Voice newspaper, whose lead story has to do with a National Assembly member, and it reads, Honorable Kante harps on importance of peace and unity, challenges National Assembly leaders to refrain from biases. Police PRO refutes rumors of Baitullah presence in Gambia. Remittances remained resilient but likely to slow, according to World Bank report. Let's move on to the Standard newspaper. The Standard newspapers, as you would expect, has to do with a denial from the government of the Gambia with regard to mismanagement of funds. And it says, Attorney General says, report of unaccounted $22 million from sale of Jammeh's assets is misleading. Was Indian drug controller bribed to switch samples of cough syrup that killed Gambian children? Well, this is a question, on the Standard newspaper, as there claims that perhaps there was some foul play with regard to samples of cough syrup. That is linked to the death of about 70 Gambian children. Court of Appeal rejects Banja's bail appeal. Banja is a former permanent secretary for water and fisheries who was sentenced to 2 years for corruption, and he had appealed the case at the Court of Appeal, but this court also rejected his appeal, according to this report. Voracious appetite for loans on White Elephant projects destroying economy. That's according to Mamadou Sabali. Mamadou Sabali is the campaign manager of leading United Democratic Party UDP. This comes a few days after the Gambia's inflation has increased from 13% to 17%. And we move on to the final paper for today, and that is the Point newspaper. CTS confirms co-deployment pact with Bangladesh. Of course, the Bangladesh Army Chief of Staff had a 3-day working visit to the Gambia to assess some of the equipment the Gambia Armed Forces has ahead of possible UN deployment missions around the world. Gambia grapples with youth unemployment. That's another story. High Court discharges accused for lack of diligent prosecution. These are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Sankole Janko, for that press review.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
As Sierra Leone's general election approaches, the media sector and pressure groups are making their voices heard through the presentation of vision documents and manifestos. The media sectors, the Media We Want document outlines a comprehensive roadmap with actionable measures to advance media freedom, professionalism, sustainability, gender equality, inclusivity, journalist safety, and media literacy in Sierra Leone. Similarly, pressure groups have also adopted the practice of creating manifestos targeting politicians and political parties. The Sierra Leone Women's Manifesto 2023, an initiative led by various locally based civil society organizations, including Campaign for Good Governance, aims to address women's issues and advocate for their rights. The question arises whether politicians are willing to consider these additional manifestos alongside their own planned ones. Joining us now is the president of the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists, Ahmed Sahid Nasrallah, to shed light on this matter.
we've seen that over the years. This is our fifth democratic elections, and we've seen that every election, the political parties will present their manifestos, and in those manifestos, they will have plans for energy, for education, for health, agriculture, the economy, and so on. And also the media, but they do not often consult us, the media practitioners or the media stakeholders, to understand our own priorities and needs and sort of things. And so we decided that this year we want to tell them what we want, and this is also informed by the fact that over the last 5 years we have made some significant gains in the media landscape, and so we want to consolidate those gains by ensuring that we put together our priorities, our needs, and then put it to the politicians that this is what we want for the media. So that's why we put together this manifesto, so that we can have the buy-in of the political parties. We can also have the buy-in of the international community and also any other institution that wants to make any intervention into the media. This is our priorities, and we've categorized them into 8 thematic areas, which captures every need of the media landscape in Sierra Leone.
Right. So just like your sector, which is the media, civil society organizations have also adopted this measure. Do you think the politicians will be willing to add your manifestos to their already planned ones?
Yes, they should, because already they have like the 2 leading political parties. They've launched their manifestos way before we launched ours. But ours was going to be launched on the World Press Freedom Day. That was May 3rd. But unfortunately, we did not have enough time to consult with our members, and we also did not have the funding that was required to put this together. But yes, that's why during the launching, we invited all the political parties so that they understand, they see this, and they also know that this is what we want for the media going forward. We want an empowered and inclusive media. And so we also want their buy-in as well. And so at that launch, some of the political parties that attended make commitments that even though we've launched our own manifestos which contain the media as well, but we're going to look at this and we're going to see how we can develop policies around this, because this is what you, the media industry players, want for your own industry. And this is definitely something that we can look into and see how we can adapt and do policy around that to ensure that our intervention is informed by the priorities on the ground for the media.
So, like you said in your submission, that some political parties attended the launch of the manifestos. So it means it hasn't gotten to the rest. Have you officially presented the manifestos to all the political parties in the country?
Yes, we have taken note of those who did not attend the program, and we have made some calls and trying to pick some interviews so that we present this document to them officially. That is what we're going to do. We are also going to meet with the international community as well, one by one, and also present this document. Because this document now will now serve as a framework for any intervention that will happen in the media going forward.
Right. Did the ruling party attend the launch?
Yes, they attended the launch. So, because we have been working directly with the Ministry of Information and Communications, we have been collaborating with them to embark on several programs in the last 5 years. So it was this type of information to make a brief statement because of the cooperation and the collaboration that we have doing. And so he represented the ministry and also represented his party.
Right. So moving forward, if this manifesto that you said has already been presented to all political parties, in case if any of the political leaders emerge as the next president to govern the country and don't follow your manifestos, what would be your next line of action if that does happen?
We're going to engage. We are going to continue to engage, because this manifesto is not something like a law that you have to obey. It's just like the manifestos of the political parties. This is what we plan to do when we come to power, and this is what we want as media. If you want to intervene or if you want to support the media, that's definitely we'll engage and make them realize that this is our priority. These are our priorities. This is the framework that we want. Anybody who wants to intervene into the media, including government, this document is what you should look into. And if you need further discussions, we are available. The media stakeholders are available, and we can discuss and see how we can push that forward. Yes, but definitely it's going to be engagement, it's going to be dialogue, it's going to be how lobbying and advocacy around this document so that it forms the basis or the framework for any future intervention in the media.
Ahmed Sahid Nasrallah is the president of the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists. Now to some sports updates. Former Nigerian hopeful Eberechi Eze claims he has no regrets in choosing England over Nigeria. This comes after the Crystal Palace forward accepted Gareth Southgate's call up to England's squad for this month's Euro 2024 qualifiers. Eze was called to the Three Lions setup following an impressive domestic campaign with Palace. And that is it for sports. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County. And in Ghana, Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Inyas Bilimu has been on the console. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek for our Facebook Live coverage. Do interact with us via social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram at the WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, it's a rebroadcast of our agenda program, 50-50 with Atiawe Nebela Lawson. I am James Adjapong. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music. Get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.